Well, how was dinner, everybody? Good. Well, tonight we have the pleasure of having the zoo director, Ralph Piland, which was born and raised in Waynesboro, Virginia. I asked him if he'd ever heard of the Eastern Shore of Maryland, because he told me he'd come here through Phoenix. And he said, yes, he used to come over here with his father to Assateague, Chincoteague, and go fishing and stuff. So he was somewhat familiar with us. And like I said, he came here. He was a deputy director at his zoo in Phoenix. And he's also been involved with a couple zoos in Chicago. And he's been here for a little over 2 years. Ralph has a son at Bennett School. And I'd like to introduce Ralph Piland.
Well, thank you very much. The Salisbury Zoo's in its 61st year, and during a lot of that time, there's been a very positive relationship between the Lions Club and the zoo. So I'm very happy to be here, and I want to do a couple things. If you can hear me okay, I'm going to go over by the computer maybe so I can pull up some files, and I want to show you a couple videos and a couple pictures to illustrate some of the things I want to talk about this evening. So let me know if you can't hear, and if at any time you have questions. I'm much more comfortable doing a dialogue than I am doing a presentation, so I'm happy to take questions at any point. Bear with me, this is a computer I don't normally use, so. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
This is Greedo, who was our male Andean bear, and I think many of you maybe saw in the newspaper in the last couple days about his death. Greedo was 24 years old, and we believed at the time that he was the oldest Andean bear to ever have successfully sired an offspring. He was the father of Alba, who was born last January at the zoo, with Chafka, our female. He had been here for a long time. In the last 18 months, he had been exhibiting some neurological symptoms, some seizures. He was being medicated for that fairly successfully. We were able to reduce the frequency and the severity of those, but recently he appeared to have suffered a stroke, and we sedated him, examined him, our vet, but it did not appear there was a prospect for him recovering from that. So we did make the decision to euthanize him. We have submitted tissue samples, a large number of tissue samples, up to Johns Hopkins University. They're going to be doing the histopathology on Greedo, and so we're hopeful in the next 2 to 3 weeks that we'll be able to get a more definitive diagnosis about what happened to him. But I don't want to dwell on maybe a sad part of our bear program, but I got a couple of short videos I'd like to show you about the positive part of our Andean bear program and the offspring. Many of you may have been out to the zoo and seen our young cub that was born. This was taken in about April, and this is the cub that after a naming contest through the city of Salisbury was named Alba, which is Spanish for dawn. She was born in January of this year, a little bit to our surprise. Chaska, the female, was trained both at the National Zoo, where she came from, and here, to present at the front of a cage for a ultrasound examination. And we did an ultrasound exam on her in November, and the veterinarian told us she's not pregnant. She started exhibiting some maternal behaviors, a little bit of denning activity. We gave her access to what we have as a maternity den as part of the bear complex. And she investigated that. And we also had, thanks to a generous donor, been able to put heated floors in our primary bear dens. And so one January morning, one of the keepers went in, and the bear that wasn't pregnant had a cub. And Andean bears are notorious for being challenging mothers in that they're very sensitive to disruption. And in the first 4 weeks, often, if they're disturbed, they will actually kill the youngster as part of a defense mechanism. Because if they're disturbed, they would need to leave their den, and they obviously couldn't take a young cub with them. So for about the first 4 weeks, we basically left her alone. She didn't eat much. We observed as best we could. We did provide her a little food, but we let her be a bear. Gary Muir, who's one of our long-term keepers, many of you may know him, said she knows a lot more about being a bear than we do. So we took his advice and we tried to let her do what she knew to do as a mother. And so this was the result. She has gone from being a very instinctual mother to being a very patient mother, putting up with a cub that I'll show you another short video that's gotten even more rambunctious. But this is an important part for us. We've got a long-term history of emphasizing regional animals, North American animals, and some South American animals. But this represents one of our nice international conservation efforts. We're part of the AZA's Species Survival Plan or program for these bears. There's about 50 Andean bears in captivity in the United States. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature, that's the group that produces the Red Data Book, which is the determining factor for whether a species is endangered or vulnerable or threatened, their status in the wild. They estimate that there's about 20,000 of these bears left in the wild in South America, and they expect over the next 10 to 12 years that that population will decline by about 30%, primarily due to loss of habitat. So this cub was the only female cub born to North American zoos in the last year. It was one of 3 cubs born overall. The other 2 were 2 males born at the National Zoo in Washington. So we're feeling very strongly that we want to make this one of our cornerstone species, one of our cornerstone efforts at the zoo. The capacity to sustain this captive population and then further contribute to the wild conservation of the species in the wild. Chaska very early on didn't want the cub to come outside. It would try to come outside and she would push it back in, or if she was inside the den, would pull it back in. And then it reached a certain point where she decided it was time for it to come out, and then she pushed it out, whether it wanted to go or not. Unlike a lot of zoo animals, we were talking earlier at the table, with primates, a lot of maternal behavior has to be learned through observation. With bears, it appears that a lot more of that is innate, hardwired behavior. Even though she had the opportunity at the National Zoo to observe other young bears, Chaska really knew how to be a mom, and we simply had to follow her lead. She was born January 23rd of this year. So now this is video that was taken just 2 days ago. And you can see she's grown a lot and gotten a lot more independent. What Chaska is doing is actually something we encourage in the non-public area because that's representative of the behavior that she does to allow the veterinarians to do an ultrasound. She has to come up and present and hold her paws in a certain position. She'll get rewards, and then she has to tolerate them shaving some of the hair off her stomach, putting the alcohol gel on, and then doing the ultrasound analysis. Of course, for all that hard work, it didn't help us this past year. This is, we do behavioral enrichment where we hide things around the exhibit, we give them treats. This was inadvertent behavioral enrichment because the keeper forgot to take her food bowl when he left. And this may be a little bit of a Dickinsonian moment where she's going, "Please, sir, may I have some more?" But you can see the dexterity of the bears and their innate curiosity. So that's the mom, Chaska, and that's the cub, Alba, who you can see is probably about 2/3 the size of the mother already. She will stay with the mom for between 1 year and 2 years. At some point in the wild, the mom would say, "Enough is enough, time for you to leave." When that happens, we've already been told that this cub will go to San Diego as part of the breeding program. The SSP analyzes the genetic background of all the bears in the country, and then they make recommendations to maintain maximum genetic diversity in the population. And so as part of that, they're recommending that she go to San Diego, and then right now they're working on identifying a male to come here to replace Greedo that we can then pair with Chaska. Greedo was very valuable genetically because he wasn't represented in the North American population. So the SSP was very happy when this cub was born. And we were all hoping, even with Greedo's illness, that perhaps we could get another cub from him, but it didn't work out that way. But we will be trying to balance getting her ready to ship out, sending her out, bringing the male in. We've got a fairly small facility, so introducing a new animal to this group, having an animal that's being pushed away by its mom as part of the natural behavior, all of that would make for a complex management situation. So exactly when we bring in the new male, exactly when we send her out is still up in the air, but most of that will be going on over the next 12 months or so. Yes, sir.
Is the new male on loan, or will it establish a home in Salisbury?
Well, usually if the pairings are successful, then he'll stay here as long as he's producing cubs that are viable in supporting the population. But the SSPs make recommendations sometimes to move animals around. Zoos very seldom buy or own animals outright anymore. Most of the animals are managed as part of these collaborative groups and are sent on what we call breeding loans to other facilities. And so the original zoo may retain title to the animal, but the decisions about where that animal goes are really made by the collaborative groups rather than by an individual zoo. Yes, sir.
If Guido hadn't expired, would he be part of the group, or would he have been separated, or what?
No, the males in the wild don't participate in parental care at all. They'll breed with the female, and immediately after that, they're off on their own, away, and forgotten. So we had him separated into what would have been the maternity den for her, because she was occupying the nice, warm, cozy primary dens. But he had access to what we call the patio, which was the area with the swimming pool, if you're familiar with the bear exhibit, because Greedo loved swimming in the summer. So over this past summer, because he wasn't in with Chaska, who normally stole most of his juicier tidbits from his food bowl. He had the patio to go swimming all the time. He probably put on about 30 or 40 pounds over this past summer, leading the good bachelor life out on the patio. Other questions I can answer about the bears? I'm emphasizing this because we're really going to try to emphasize the Andean Bear program. We've got a history of success at this institution. We feel it's a great conservation story and something that we can contribute to. So we're hoping you'll be hearing more and more about activities with the Andean bears at the zoo. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'd like to maybe make you guys guinea pigs a little bit and show you.
So what will be the approximate age of your new male bear?
We don't know until the SSP makes a recommendation.
About 79, right, Ed?
We're assuming it'll be something closer to Chaska's age. But we just won't know, because they'll make that decision based on the genetic background of the animal, and they'll try to get maximum diversity.
How old is Chaska?
Chaska is 6.
6.
Yep, she was born at the National Zoo and came here in 2013.
You'll just have to bear with him for a while.
This is a sketch that's been done by Becker Morgan, a local architectural firm, that we're working with to do a new master facilities plan for the zoo. It's partly supported by a grant from the Maryland Historic Authority and by the Delmarva Zoological Society, which is a separate 501c3 that helps the zoo fund capital projects. And we're looking at what do we want to develop as our primary presentation to the public. How do we continue to move forward? What's the nature of the zoo that we want to continue to provide to this community? And just as a quick summary, I think what the feedback that we're getting, the path that we're looking at now, and we will try to seek more input from the community before we commit to a particular path. But the zoo is part of a park system within the city of Salisbury. It's a small zoo. It's a shaded, wooded spot that has meandering paths and quiet spots, and requires people to sort of find their way around the park. And a lot of people feel that that's really important to continue that atmosphere. That we're not a small zoo who wants to get big. We're a small zoo that wants to stay as part of this community, improve what we can offer, but we're still a small zoo as part of the Salisbury park system. It's been a unique characteristic of this zoo that it's free admission and free parking. As best as I can determine, that's one of 5 accredited zoos in the country that still offer that. So it's pretty unique. So the history of the zoo, the way it's developed, its capacity to act as an accessible resource to the community are all things that we feel are important to perpetuate. And so we're trying to build a plan that helps capture that still. This is the primary pathway that goes through the zoo. It's used by walkers and joggers, not people necessarily coming to the zoo as a final destination. A lot of zoos would be uncomfortable with that, but it's part of our history and the way we've developed, and we want to continue to retain that feature. So we're looking at a long-term plan that builds on maintaining that throughway through the park, that can use that to host special events, evening activities, things that aren't maybe part of the normal zoo spectrum. And then that allows us to push some of the animals that aren't necessarily compatible with zoobilation, evening activities, away in areas of the park that are more secure from that activity. So we're moving toward creating more zones within the zoo. So we would have a Tropics Trail zone here. We're looking at additional improvements to the wallaby exhibit to create an Australia zone. Each of these would have their own color pattern, theme, that would make them readily identifiable from that main pathway. But then once you get into that, we would still try to retain the sense of exploration and surprise as you move around. Often when you're planning zoos, the architects ask you to start with, well, what's the list of animals you want to exhibit? We're trying to change that a little bit, and we're starting to say, we'll figure out the animal part later. We want to come up with a list of the activities and experiences that we want to provide to the public. I was fortunate to work with Dr. George Rabb at Brookfield, who was chairman of the Species Survival Commission, and he did a paper on how zoos have changed and how they've moved from being sort of curiosity cabinets and menageries to being conservation centers. And it's not that we want to engage principally in conservation activities. What we want to do is provide experiences that stimulate caring attitudes in people, and then therefore create outcomes that support conservation and support an ongoing relationship with the living world. So that's what we're trying to do. We want to provide appropriate experiences to this community. We want those to be inspiring experiences that build on engagement with the living world. And we want that to then inspire actions that support a sustainable relationship with the living world, both in this community and in a broader sense. So any questions about that or feedback? Yes, sir.
I have a question. As far as the community support in the Salisbury area in general, even to the drop boxes that you have for donations.
Right.
Everything that you see in the press and everything, no one's never turned, I mean, you guys never struggled for support. Even, you know, your cans at Halloween, you're
Right.
making mucho money. I can't see with the community support having to charge to go into zoo. I know every time I've taken the grandchildren there, you put the $5 or $10 in the box. The box seems like it's always got money in. I mean, you know.
The community's been very generous. The city supports the core operation of the zoo. The Salisbury Zoo Commission.
No, I'm talking about the general public.
Right.
I mean,
But we really have a mix of support mechanisms for the zoo. The Salisbury Zoo Commission supports outside of what the city provides through its philanthropic efforts, all the educational activities that we do. The educational programs that are presented at the zoo, the outreach to schools. Right now we have a whole series of school programs that are going on at the zoo, and all those are supported by the Zoo Commission. Everything can always be better and can be improved, and finances are the limitation to that. We do think that it's important that we remain an accessible, and as long as we can, a free resource to the community.
oh, I agree with you. I've taken my children there, and now I take my grandchildren there, and I mean, the consensus is that people are giving you money. I mean, and I don't know what would happen if if you would charge or how would you do that? Some people come, I've seen several people come 3 or 4 days a week. I mean, the kids get up in the morning and they want to go to the zoo. I mean, when you have a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old, they want to go to the zoo. You know, if it's going to cost you $5 or $10 to go to the zoo every day.
And a lot of zoos in this country are $15 and $20 for admission, and parking on top of that.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I was going to say. You're going to alienate a lot of people. In the long run, you're going to get that money.
well, and I think people want it as an accessible resource, and that's what we're trying to sustain.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
With other than in Salisbury, the schools from surrounding us with busloads of things, is that covered with any financial support, or is that just a freebie thing too?
That's a free resource to the community. We get buses from Delaware, from, you know, all across the peninsula.
It's the only zoo around.
That's true. And again, I think the schools feel it's important, the community feels it's important that that resource is there. And what we're trying to do is develop a plan that will allow us to continue to provide that resource as best we can.
Your private birthday parties are great. I mean, I went to several of them with the grandkids. They're neat, the staff that you have and how they present it to the children. I mean, they bring it right down to their level. They do an outstanding job.
That's great to hear, and we just did our Halloween Happenings event last weekend. It'll be coming up this weekend as well. It's been well attended, and you know, again, we've shifted our focus to providing a resource for families with young kids. And that's what that event is geared to support. And that's really what a lot of zoos are about. If you talk to families at any zoo, children are the catalyst for most visits to a school. Children, grandchildren, it's part of that, and that, you know, and again, that's one of the things we're trying to create a system that will sustain. Other questions? I know I'm taking up a lot of your time.
Questions?
If not, thank you. You know, thanks for all the things the Lions Club has done in the past to support the zoo. And please come out and visit us. We're close by.
Yeah.